This is The Extra Point, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast, sponsored by your Phoenix Suns.
All right, joining me, 98.7 Suns Insider, Suns broadcaster Tim Ring. Tim, obviously some big news breaking today. It's not official by the Suns yet, but Nick Richards, Charlotte Hornets big man, looking like he's on the move to the Valley in exchange for Josh Okogie. There's multiple second-round picks involved as well. When you heard this news, I'm sure maybe from Shams Charania or some kind of NBA insider, what was going through your head in terms of initial reaction?
Well, it's funny, Elliott. I wasn't surprised because, for one, you knew the Suns had to do something about the center position, and it had to be done ASAP. They couldn't trade Josh Okogie until today, the 15th. Otherwise, I think this deal may have been done a while ago. But I'm not surprised, and I'll tell you this little bit of insight, and it's not a great nugget, but I think it's a pretty good nugget. The Charlotte Hornets and Nick Richards played in Phoenix on Sunday. And savvy observers of the pregame scene out at Footprint Center noticed that the Suns video guys were shooting an awful lot of Nick Richards video pregame. And I said to myself, let me file that one away. So, look, point being, they couldn't trade Okogie until today. I think this was a guy that's been on their radar for a while, even going back to last year. And when you look at the current Suns situation with Yusuf Nurkic being benched and then getting a couple DNP CDs and then now coming down with an illness and not even making the road trip at least to start, and then watching the Suns get absolutely, really the only word I can think of is, they were embarrassed on the interior, not only from a defensive standpoint, but most importantly from a defensive rebounding standpoint over the last several games. This was just not going to work, and you knew it wasn't sustainable, and you knew that the Suns front office and Matt Ishbia and James Jones had to go out there and do something. Now, Nick Richards is not, the second coming of Moses Malone, but he's better than what they have. And you like Oso, right? He's a rookie, though, and he's not that physically strong yet to make a difference. And Mason Plumlee, bless his heart, is a backup center. And the more he played, the more you saw that. So this is one move that is going to help. How much will it move the meter from a wins and losses standpoint? We're going to find out. But I don't think it's the last move the Suns are going to make. I still think they need to go out there and find a couple of different bodies, bigger bodies, to help maybe, get them back in the playoff race, and then see if they can get a top 4 seed.
So do you see Nick Richards coming in and immediately kind of taking Nurk's minutes and getting those starting minutes for this Suns team?
I do, Elliott. I think once he gets here and gets acclimated, he's going to be the starting center. He's been a backup center in Charlotte, and that's not a very good basketball team, but he was playing behind another 7-footer that was pretty good in Mark Williams. We saw Williams just decimate the Suns' interior defenders in that game on Sunday. So, yeah, Richards is going to be the starter. Yusuf Nurkic, Elliott, I don't know what the future holds for Nurk. My guess is they're going to try to trade him. He's got a big number attached to him, though. So the good news is you could get a player back who also has a big number attached, which means there's a good chance that player's pretty good. The problem is who's going to take Yusuf Nurkic and give you back a pretty good player. Listen, Nurk has had some good moments in this league. He's had some good moments while he's been here, but for whatever reason, he has not clicked in the Budenholzer system. He has not delivered consistently, and the Suns feel that they are better off without him playing, at least for now. And now that Richards is here, I really think they're going to try their hardest to move him in a deal that hopefully, in theory, makes the Suns better. I don't know if that deal is out there. I don't know if that player exists. I don't know if that team exists. But that's the doors the Suns have to knock on here to try to get this roster in way better shape. Because let's be honest, right now it's not good enough, in that Western Conference.
Yeah, 100%. And it's definitely a very crowded front court right now with Nurk still on this team. That's for sure. The minutes are going to be interesting to look at moving forward. Let's talk a little bit about Richards. He's 27 years old. He's 7 feet tall. He can shoot it pretty efficiently. That's what he did in Charlotte, but he's also a lot more athletic. His defense is going to play a big role here and maybe help some of those offensive rebounding issues. What makes his impact a successful one when he gets to Phoenix in your mind, Tim?
Play defense and rebounding. I mean, Elliott, if he can do that at a reasonably decent level, I mean, he doesn't even have to be peak Nurkic. I mean, that's what I was saying a minute ago. Nurkic, when he was on his game, was a highly effective center. He just wasn't on his game enough over the last season and a half that he's been here. But I mean, you go back, I mean, there was a game last year where he hung 31 on Jokic and the Nuggets. And you go back to a couple of wins earlier this season over the Dallas Mavericks. That first win in Phoenix when the Suns were rolling there out of the gate, I mean, Nurk had 18 and 14. I mean, are there games where Nick Richards is going to give them 18 and 14? I hope so. I think that's a possibility, but I don't think it's going to be like that night in and night out. But if you can clean up the defensive glass, not let what happened last night in Atlanta ever happen again. That was atrocious.
Yeah.
And like I said, I mean, it was embarrassing. And it was embarrassing for the Suns to lose a game like that when you just could not control a defensive rebound. I mean, they've given up 20 offensive rebounds like 3 times in the last, week or so. So take care of that. Make layups, okay? And when you have the opportunity to dunk the basketball, dunk it. Take advantage of the superstars that are playing around you. You'll get open looks, run to the rim. I mean, that's the one thing about, even when Nurkic was playing well, he wasn't a rim runner, right? I mean, if you lobbed it up to him, he caught it and he came back down and he shot faked once and then he hopefully made the layup. But Nick Richards is a young athletic big that you can start lobbing the basketball to him and maybe he can finish the way young bigs are supposed to in this league. So if he can do that, he does have a problem with turnovers, so I guess he'll fit right in some ways. But he's got to take better care of the basketball. And I think, who knows? I mean, look, it's not like the Suns look like a contender right now, but they're better than Charlotte. And they've been better than Charlotte. And you have Kevin Durant and you have Devin Booker. So I say that because I think a guy like Nick Richards may come to a new setting, a new team, and say, man, I got to elevate my game. I mean, I'm playing with Kevin Durant. I'm playing with Devin Booker. I'm playing with Bradley Beal. I can't let these guys down. So a lot of times in these situations, you'll see a player like Richards, who's been around the block a little bit. He's 27. It's not like he's 22.
Yeah.
So he's been around the league a few times, Elliott. And I think this may rejuvenate him. And I think the byproduct on the other side is, even though, he's not an all-star coming in here, but I think in a way he may rejuvenate the Suns locker room, at least in the initial stages. And maybe we'll see a better product on the court because of that as well.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into what I was going to ask you next, is that it's kind of whenever you look at a trade or any kind of change in the lineups, you always have to put it into the context with this team of how it fits in with the big three, although really it's more like the big two at this point with Beal not starting. But I mean, like how do you feel like, I'm sure you watched Richards' game with a little more intent after you saw the whole video situation with the Suns guys and stuff. Yeah. How do you feel like his game fits in, and how do you think that guys like KD and Book will kind of like coexist with him on the court?
Yeah, you like my detective work out there pregame?
That was good.
Like,
was
hey,
insider knowledge right there.
What's going on over there? Look, I get the feeling, being around this team like I have been the last several years, and the entire Kevin Durant era, I think Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are a little fed up about the way things are going here. Not that those guys can't be better at times.
Sure. Not
that they can't do more, but you get the feeling just by, looking at them, body language, facial expressions, and also, their lack of intensity at times over the last several weeks that, something's amiss with that locker room and that roster. And, maybe they weren't happy with Nurkic and the job that the big fella was doing. Maybe they were not all that, thrilled about turning the keys over to a Mason Plumlee or an Oso, because Oso's so young and Plumlee's obviously, he's a backup at this point in his career. So I think from that standpoint, I think Devin Booker and Kevin Durant are going to be really happy that Nick Richards is on his way, because I think he's going to give them a dimension that they've been lacking this year. So I think that's good for the locker room. And if it's good for the locker room in terms of the mental makeup and the disposition, like I said earlier, that could translate onto the court with some better play. Having said that, he's just a guy. He averages 9 and 7. I don't think he's going to come in and change the entire dynamic of the basketball team, but it's a step, right? It's a step in the right direction. I think they'll be better with him than they were with the way Nurkic was playing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't want to say, because I think Elliott, the best case scenario this year would be for Yusuf Nurkic to play to his potential and be the guy we have seen in flashes over the last year and a half. But that clearly hasn't happened, and the Suns no longer trust that it ever will happen. And that's why we are at today where we're at. So step one, I think it's a good step. It's going to help. It's going to make everybody maybe a little more focused in that locker room, I think, because they know the cavalry, even though it's a small cavalry now, is coming. The big question for me is how many more trades are coming, and what is this roster going to look like post-trade deadline?
Yeah, and I think that we all agree that something had to be done with the Suns. I mean, the current lineup in the current roster was just not producing in the way that anybody was hoping for. I mean, you have a losing record with 2 Olympic starters, future Hall of Famers, the 3. Yeah. I mean, Bradley Beal. I mean, like that. This payroll is as high as it can get, and they were not producing. So something had to be done. This is probably, like you said, the first of hopefully more changes to happen. Let's talk a little bit about the trade itself. Giving up a guy who was pretty well liked, I think you can agree, in terms of a Kogi in the locker room. And a whole bunch of second round. I mean, I don't think the Suns have a second round draft pick for like a decade at this point now. So
they got one back. They got one back. So I mean, essentially, the net loss was 2 second round picks. The one they got back for next year is actually the Nuggets second round pick. So that's going to be. But look, Elliott, it's currency, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many second round picks stick in the NBA?
Sure.
I mean, it's gotten a little better lately, but historically, I know your producer Joe back there is yelling Draymond Green, but few and far between really stick and become difference makers in the NBA. So you're talking about really when you talk about second round picks, you're talking about the ability to use those for deals like this. And you lost a couple in this trade. You traded 3, you got 1 back. I'm glad you brought up Okogie. I've been a big Josh Okogie fan since he's been here. I know a lot of people are. At the same time, you have to give up something to get something.
Yeah.
And the reality is, Elliott, on a good team, on a playoff contending team, it's really hard for a guy with Josh Okogie's abilities to crack that rotation consistently. Like literally, like if you're as good as you think you are and should be, the best you're going to get out of Josh Okogie is, well, A, if you got injuries and you need somebody, but B, you just need a guy to come in and be a change of pace guy, play a little defense, scrap around a little bit, kind of change the complexion of a game. And he's really good at that. And he was really good at that. And he'll be good at that in Charlotte. But at the same time, if you're a solid rotation in this league, and that's even though the Suns are not there right now, but that's where they aim to be. Josh Okogie is probably just not going to crack that rotation on a consistent basis. So from that standpoint, I don't hate having to part with Okogie when you're getting a starting center back for a player like Josh Okogie.
So what do you feel like are some of the next steps that are in terms of priorities that the Suns need to do to continue to try to make their way back towards being a contender in the Western Conference?
Well, Nick Richards is a start on that front line, Elliott. I still think they need more size and toughness and rebounding and a defensive presence and an attitude on that front line.
Is there a player that comes to mind?
You know what? It's funny you ask. I was just kind of going over the list of power forwards, to use that old term in the NBA. It doesn't seem like they really have those anymore. And that's the problem. Everybody's kind of devolved into these, 3-and-D guys, 3-point shooters. So, but I will say this. If Bradley Beal is going to stay on the bench, if they can't deal Bradley Beal and they decide to not pursue Jimmy Butler and they decide that, well, we can't find a third team to take Beal because Miami's not taking him, if Bradley Beal stays on the bench, and we can talk about that as well, but here's where I'm going with this. If Bradley Beal stays on the bench, I don't want to part with Grayson Allen because we all like Grayson Allen and he brings a lot to the basketball team. But it's easier to part with Grayson Allen if Bradley Beal is coming off the bench.
100%.
If you could turn Grayson Allen into this mythical 6'8", 6'9", defensive-minded forward who can get rebounds, score a little bit, but play some D. But more importantly, Elliott, give this team some sorely needed toughness. And they paid Grayson Allen a lot of money. And a part of the reason why they did is because now they could trade him for a guy like I was talking about with Nurkic. One of the reasons why you gave Josh Okogie and Grayson Allen those dollar amounts is because if you do want to trade him, you can get something better back. Because remember, the Suns can't aggregate players to get a player because of the second apron.
Yeah.
But Elliott, I mean, again, like, this is just me talking now. This is not insider information.
Sure.
To explore a Grayson Allen move that would allow you to bring in somebody to help Nick Richards on that front line that, again, gives you rebounding, defense, and toughness, you could finally get Durant at the 3 and Booker at the 2 where they belong. Like, that's part of the problem with their lack of toughness and rebounding is that's not Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
He's a 3. I don't care how tall he is. He's a 3. You know, he wants to face the basket, shoot jumpers. He'll grab a rebound once in a while if he has to. His rebounding numbers are pretty good. But nobody's going to confuse Kevin Durant with a bruising, inside, defensive, rebounding big man, right? I mean, so you get Durant at the 3, Book at the 2, Tyus Jones at the 1, Nick Richards at the 5, this pie-in-the-sky big man to play alongside Richards. And then off your bench, you got Bradley Beal, you got Royce O'Neal, you got Mason Plumlee, you got Oso, you got Ryan Dunn. So, I mean, to me, the complexion of the team looks different if Matt Ishbia and James Jones and Josh Bartelstein could maybe find a deal that works in that regard. I mean, essentially, Elliott, I'll say this, and I've said this on the radio before. They're short power big men, and they have a surplus of shooting guards. Okay, so, I mean, I'm no basketball genius, but maybe take your third shooting guard who's really good, because you already have 2 good ones in Booker and Beal, and send the third guy, Grayson Allen, to shore up a position that you really don't have anybody at. So to me, like that, those were some of the moves that I you know, if I were in charge, I would make, or at least attempt to make. And then maybe you have a different looking team for the final 2.5 months of the season. I mean, Elliott, it's not good now, right? They're 18-19. They're 11th in the West, but they're just 2.5 games out of the 5th seed. Yeah. And there's so much basketball left to be played that if you could retool on the fly without quote unquote blowing it up, you know, maybe it would be worth it to not give up on the Booker Durant nucleus dream that the organization and a lot of fans have had since KD arrived just under 2 years ago.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, just trying to think of some names for that mythical 4 spot. I mean, like, I don't know all the contract details and availability, but does anybody stick out to you? I'm just thinking through maybe guys like Herb Jones in New Orleans or something, or like Jaden McDaniels or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, those guys would be great. You know, I mean, like Herb Jones, maybe a little on the slender side, but he's exactly the defensive and rebound. He's long though, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you'd have to find somebody that, you know, kind of matches up with Grayson's salary. You know, and listen, either, I mean, what would be the motivation of the other team, right? Yeah. It's either maybe to get out of a contract you're not wild about, or maybe you feel you could use a player like Grayson Allen more than you could use the big man that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I just started doing my homework on it today.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest, there weren't a lot of names that jumped out to me, which is why I'm not like just throwing names out there. Plus, I don't want to be irresponsible and just start. Hey, they should go get Zion Williamson and make sure he goes on a diet. But you know, and I don't, or somebody who's really, really good, because I don't want to give Suns false hope and a guy that's unrealistic. So it's got to be like the perfect fit. I mean, you're talking about threading a needle. You got to find a guy who's good enough to make that deal, and a team that's willing to give him up for Grayson Allen. Yeah. So again, these are just hypotheticals anyway.
Sure.
Nobody at the Suns have told me that they're looking to trade Grayson Allen for a big man.
Yeah.
But you asked me what you thought how they could still get better. That's a way that I think they can get better.
So, Tim, I'm going to put you on the spot, though, a little bit. How many more trades do you think the Suns make between now and the deadline?
I'm going to say one.
Okay.
Because if it's two, that means maybe this Bradley Beal third team Jimmy Butler thing happens. And Elliott, I'm not sure how I feel about that long term.
Yeah.
I think short term would be a hell of a lot of fun.
Sure.
This spring to see how it goes along. But I mean, you signed Jimmy Butler to a long term deal at the age of 35.
Yeah, that doesn't seem
Durant
ideal.
on a long term deal if he resigns. I mean, so
somehow the Suns get even older, which I didn't think was possible.
And look, selfishly, I'd rather see Jimmy Butler and Nick Richards playing out the string in Phoenix than what we're looking at now, because I think what we're looking at now, I don't see much of a pathway to advancing far in the playoffs. And with Jimmy Butler, at least there's a chance that could happen. But I understand the long-term ramifications there. So if that doesn't happen, I understand why. And I understand why maybe it didn't happen, not for lack of trying, but for a lack of a third team that would take on Bradley Beal. So I would say there's probably one more trade coming, maybe two, but I would say right now, you put me on the spot, I would say one.
Okay.
I would say one more deal. And because I don't think they're thinking, oh, we got Nick Richards. I mean, let's plan the parade. I mean, it's like,
I hope not. Yeah.
I think that is a step one. That is a piece. I think it's going to be a good piece for who he is and what he is, but it's certainly not enough. So you don't wash your hands and say, all right, guys, go win us a title or win us a playoff series or two. You got Nick Richards. I don't see that as possible. So I think they're going to try to retool on the fly here, and we'll see what they do. Trade deadline's in less than a month, so it's gonna be here sooner than we think.
Yeah, going to be an interesting next few weeks. Tim, thanks for hopping on and talking about this. Hopefully we'll see some continued movement with the Suns as they try to inch their way up the Western Conference standings and kind of revive a season that right now is not looking too good, that's for sure. Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. And you know what? Hey, never a dull moment. Never a dull moment, Elliott. Yeah, no, always keep your eyes and your head on a swivel pretty much around here. So you got it. Thanks, Tim, for speaking with us.
This is The Extra Point, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast, sponsored by your Phoenix Suns.